Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Monday, June 1st, 2020. Today I'm going to talk about the latest news related to the coronavirus in sports and things that I've been hearing. Go over the NASCAR race from yesterday and look ahead to tonight's race in the Xfinity Series. KBO, go over the results from the weekend, look ahead to tomorrow's morning's games, and I'll do my 2015 top 10 NFL players and games. But I do want to start the podcast again by talking about the unfortunate situation that's going on in our nation right now in the aftermath of the unfortunate murder of George Floyd out in Minneapolis. You're seeing protesting everywhere. You're seeing violence everywhere. You're seeing rioting everywhere. It's one thing to protest silently and peacefully, but more peacefully because protests really can't be silent, but do it peacefully. But riots and violence is over the top, and that should not happen. And obviously what happened to George Floyd should have never happened either. Every sports team and everybody in the media is coming out with statements, and it's just hard to comprehend all of this, and I'm really struggling to find the right words to say about this, but my heart goes out to George Floyd's family, like I said on Friday's show, and my heart goes out to those hurt in the Louisville situation as well. NYPD officers that are getting injured. An NYPD officer actually committed suicide, unfortunately, in the wake of all this. So thoughts and prayers go out to that police officer's family and the NYPD. And hopefully this just all blows over sooner rather than later, and we can focus on reopening our country after all this COVID stuff. And it's going to be interesting to see if COVID cases go up in result of all the protesting and whatnot. And because obviously not everybody, but a lot of people have been staying home, and now you see protests everywhere and clips of people protesting on highways and a big tank truck almost hitting some protesters, but luckily nobody got injured. But that truck driver did wind up getting arrested in Minneapolis for almost hitting the protesters. And like I said, it's just very unfortunate. My buddy Derek said something very appropriate in my mind, saying injustice for all. He's right. The Pledge of Allegiance, that is the last phrase of the Pledge of Allegiance, and you stand for the flag, and we are one country. So I applaud him for thinking of that. I think that's very clever in terms of what to say throughout these trying times. And like I said, a lot of athletes are speaking upon it. A lot of sports franchises and sports commissioners and governors are speaking about the situation and comprehending their thoughts and prayers to everybody involved. And like I said, hopefully this just blows over soon and we can talk about more positivity in our world here. And speaking of positivity, the NBA seems to be close to having a plan done for returning. Adrian Wojnarowski reported that on Thursday is when the proposal is supposed to go through with the NBA. They're supposed to bring 22 teams, which is a lot of teams, obviously, and apparently it's mostly West teams. A lot of East teams are being left out, so you won't see the Knicks. You won't see you might see the Bulls. It's not inconceivable that the Bulls are involved, that's not inconceivable. You won't see the Knicks. You won't see the Golden State Warriors. You won't see the Hawks. You won't see the Cavaliers. The Wizards could be involved. I think it's going to go by the 22 teams with the good record or the better records, and the 8 worst teams record-wise are left out. That's how it should be. And that would mean like all those West teams that were sort of on the bubble, like New Orleans and Sacramento, San Antonio, will all be there. I heard somebody say that the Suns might be there, which I think is a little ridiculous. I don't think the Suns are very good. That's going to be the Montreal Canadiens of the NBA return, like a team that really shouldn't be there that's there. That's the Suns or the Bulls or the Wizards for that matter as well. So the NBA is looking promising. Meanwhile, Major League Baseball came out with their players' season proposal. 114-game season ending on October 31st, expanded playoffs in 2020 and 2021, and a salary deferrals if the playoffs are canceled. That's coming from, obviously, the best in the business, and that is Jeff Passan. And I think the owners are going to decline this because I just really don't have much faith in the owners. And obviously both sides are being selfish here, and I'm obviously the one that is on the side of the players because it's a flat out a better proposal and more games and more intrigue. Like the 7 playoffs per league is not a bad idea to try it out for 2 years. I actually like that idea because then it brings more intrigue, more meaningful games, more maybe memorable upsets you don't see coming. You never know. So hopefully the owners just cave in and accept this offer and be like the NBA and just go with it, but I doubt it. And I think it's 50-50 that there's a season. Obviously, the league's going to lose a lot of money if there's no season, although there are reports out there saying that some owners still might sitting out the season, which I think is lunacy. It's probably owners of teams that are tanking, like the Royals and the Baltimore Orioles and the Tigers. And some of those other tanking teams are probably the ones that don't mind sitting the season out. And it's obviously the teams that are good that want to come back, like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Nationals and the Mets and the Twins and the White Sox, the Cubs, you name it, the Red Sox, the Phillies, like all the big market teams and the teams that are good are the teams that you think want to come back. And then the teams that are either small market teams and they're bad, like the Royals, are the teams that I think are the ones that don't mind sitting the season out. The NHL still hasn't come out with a definite date for a return, unlike the NBA. The NBA is targeting July 31st, which is obviously 2 months from yesterday. And July 31st is a Friday. And the plan is that they're bringing 22 teams in, and they're not really going to go to the playoffs. They're just going to do regular season games for some of those teams that are quote-unquote on the bubble. And then they're going to go to the postseason, the 16 teams. And I think they're going to do regardless of conference, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe they do the conference thing. And then there's talk about the first round being a best of 5 rather than a best of 7. So that would be interesting. And that would, I think, lead to more parity because obviously they changed it from best of 5 to best of 7 because the 8-seed Knicks upset the Miami Heat. The reality is the 8-seed Knicks upset the Miami Heat in that lockout season because that Knicks team underachieved in the regular season and got hot at the right time and went to the finals. That team was better than an 8-seed, that Knicks team. Those 8-over-1 upsets are normally overrated 1-seeds, and in the Knicks case, undervalued or underrated 8 seeds that underachieved in the regular season, or like bad matchup or whatever, or an injury swings the series, like in the Derrick Rose case in 2012 with Philly, and why Philly ended up as an 8 seed in the second round. And then, obviously, the Grizzlies upsetting San Antonio as an 8 seed in 2011. That was a matchup thing, not necessarily like a bad team just randomly upsetting. Like, there's reasons why that upset happened. Oh, and then obviously they benefited from Manu Ginobili getting injured as well. And that's something that came back to bite the Spurs that year as well. So NBA and NHL looking good. Major League Baseball, not so much in terms of when sports will be officially coming back in terms of the bigger sports. NASCAR's been back for a little bit now, and they just completed their race at Bristol in terms of the Sprint Cup, and the winner of the race turned out to be Brad Keselowski, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the pole sitter for this race. Yes, he was, and he got off to a good start, led a majority of stage one, and then he fell back, and then he took advantage of a couple wrecks at the end of the race to wind up winning the race in Bristol yesterday. Denny Hamlin had a good race for a while, and he wrecked towards the end, and he was wrecked by Joey Logano, and then Joey Logano and Chase Elliott got into it as they were battling for first place, and then they got into a wreck within the last couple of laps, and they just went straight through with the last couple of laps without having a restart. And Brad Keselowski was the beneficiary for some of those wrecks. So good for Brad Keselowski, good win for him. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was like 13-1 or 12-1 to win the race. So good for him. He's had a decent run here since the restart of the season. So the rest of the results. Clint Bowyer took advantage of the wrecks. He came in second. That's a great finish for Clint Bowyer. Jimmy Johnson third. Bristol's not his strongest suit, so good for Jimmy Johnson. Kyle Busch fourth. And he had a good run there and had a significant lead. And NASCAR's and classics, it's never over until it's over sport, because you have cautions that happen every here and there, which lead to restarts and pit road, the whole deal. Eric Jones came in fifth, Austin Dillon fifth, Kurt Busch seventh, William Byron eighth, Chris Bell ninth, Bubba Wallace 10th. Bubba Wallace finishing in the top 10 is really good for him. And Chris Bell finishing in ninth, good for him as well. Kevin Harvick, Amir 11th. Ryan Preece finished 12th. That's good for him. John Hunter Nemechek 13th. That's good for him. Michael O'Dowd 14th. That's really good for him. 15th, Ryan Newman. He had a couple wrecks in the race. 16th, Matt Kenseth. 17th, Denny Hamlin, who I mentioned had the lead at times throughout the race. Daniel Suarez 18th. Timmy Hill 19th. Martin Truex Jr. 20th. Joey Logano 21st. Chase Elliott 22nd. Chris Buescher 23rd. Other notables, Eric Almirola, 29th. He's somebody that was in second a lot throughout the race. Matt DiBenedetto came in 31st, and that was Jeff Maglicetti, who I'm going to have later on in the week on my show. That was his pick to win the race. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 34th. He had some good runs in this race as well. Tyler Riddick, 36th. Alex Bowman, 37th. Ty Dillon, 39th. And then Ryan Blaney came, unfortunately for him, in last. Xfinity tonight, 7 o'clock on Fox Sports 1. Some of these same guys that raced last night will be in the race tonight. So, notables, and as well as the top 10 starting in the lineup for tonight. Harrison Burton in the pole, Brandon Jones second, Austin Cindric third, Justin Haley fourth, Ryan Sieg fifth, Ross Chastain sixth, Riley Herbst seventh, Daniel Hemrick eighth, Noah Gragson, 9th. Justin Allinger, 10th. Chase Briscoe, 11th. Michael Annett, 12th. Carson Ware, 13th. Vinnie Miller, 14th. Jesse Little, 15th. Jeff Green, 16th. Chase Fincham, 17th. Jeffrey Earnhardt, 18th. Ronnie Bennett Jr., 19th. Patrick Emmerling, 20th, among other notables. BJ McLeod, 24th. Timmy Hill, 25th. Al Almendinger, 27th. Joe Nemechek, 28th. Kyle Busch isn't racing in the this race for the the Xfinity Series. In terms of a winner, this is hard. I'm gonna just throw it in the air. Jeffrey Earnhardt's not a bad driver, and I won't be shocked if he gets an opportunity in the Cup Series again. He last raced in Talladega in 2019. He hasn't had a win yet in Xfinity. But he's had 3 top 10s. His best finish was 2014 and 18th in terms of a season. But why not? He hasn't had a career win. He's somebody that, like I said, I think will get another opportunity in the Cup Series. And he is the nephew of Dale Earnhardt Jr. So that's interesting. So why not Jeremy Earnhardt for the win for tonight in the Xfinity Series. Now I'm going to talk about the KBO results from the weekend and look ahead to tomorrow morning's games. Some interesting results to discuss. Starting with Saturday morning, Kia over LG 10-6, Kaiwoom over KT 14-3, SK over Hanwha 9-3, Samsung over NC 9-1. So the Dinos lose surprisingly. Doosan over Latte 5-4. Then yesterday morning, SK over Hanwha 6-4, LG over Kia 13-5, Latte over Doosan 8-3, KT over Kaiwoom 12-8, and NC over Samsung 18-7. Boy, a lot of overs are hitting lately. Tomorrow morning you have SK and NC. I'm gonna go with NC at home. SK is just not good. Kaiwoom and Hanwha. Let's go with Kaiwoom. Latte and Kia. I'm going to go with Kia. It's because Latte's been mediocre. Samsung and LG. We'll go with LG because Samsung, I think, is a little bit partying too much from its upset over the Dinos still from the other day. And then Doosan and KT will go with Doosan on the road. Doosan's on the road. So the standings, NC's 18-5, LG is 16-7, Doosan 14-9, Kaiwoom 12-12, Kia 12-12, Latte 11-12, KT 10-13, Samsung 10-14, SK 7-16, and Hanwha is 7-17. So Hanwha is dipped below SK for the worst record. LG's been playing really well. Doosan's been fine. Latte, I've been mentioning on the show, hasn't been the same since its 5-0 start, and they really are more like on Samsung, and I don't want to even say SK bad. They're not that bad, but they're kind of in that tier at Samsung rather than closer to Kaiwoom and Kia. But like I said, they benefited from that good start, and that's why their record is better than really what they are. Now I'm going to do my 2015 top 10 NFL players. A couple honorable mentions for you. Ben Roethlisberger, Pittsburgh Steelers. Odell Beckham Jr., then of the New York Football Giants. Josh Norman, Carolina Panthers. Khalil Mack, formerly of the Oakland Raiders. And Aaron Donald of the then St. Louis Rams. And now my list of the top 10. 10th place, Antonio Brown, Pittsburgh Steelers, helped lead the Steelers to the division round in the playoffs, and they wound up losing to Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos in Denver. 9th, Rob Gronkowski, New England Patriots. Obviously, the best tight end of the century. He's so good. And I think he's going to come back and help the Bucs. And he'll exceed people's expectations this year. But he was really good that year. And then, if I'm not mistaken, he got hurt that year and pretty much cost the Patriots a chance at the Super Bowl. I think that was that year. If not, then maybe I'm thinking of another year. I remember they lost in Denver in the AFC title game to Manning and Denver, and Gronkowski wasn't 100%. 8th, Adrian Peterson, Minnesota Vikings. Helped lead the Vikings to a division title, and then they wound up losing in the wild card game, courtesy of a missed kick by Blair Walsh. 7th, Luke Kuechly, Carolina Panthers. Another leader of that Carolina Panthers team that went 15-1 and represented the NFC in the Super Bowl. The quarterback of their defense, obviously now retired. 6th, Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packers. Got off to a slow start and got hot in the second half of the season. Wound up making a wild card and wound up taking a good Cardinals team to overtime in the playoffs. Well, that playoff game was in 2016, as that was, if I'm not mistaken, my number one game of the calendar year 2016. 5th, J.J. Watt, Houston Texans. The Texans made the postseason in 2015. They lost in the wild card game, I want to say, to Kansas City that year. But they obviously won the division. J.J. Watt was the leader of that defense. 4th, Von Miller, Denver Broncos. He was the leader of their defense, still is the leader of their defense. Helped the Broncos get the 1 seed in the AFC that year and en route to their Super Bowl win. 3rd, Carson Palmer, Arizona Cardinals. This was the last great year Carson Palmer's ever had. Top 3 in the MVP voting. He actually got 1 first place vote. And they wound up losing to the Panthers in the NFC title game. 2nd, Tom Brady, New England Patriots. I talked about Gronk earlier. Obviously, they lost to the Broncos in Denver in the AFC title game that year. But the Patriots got up to that great start that year. They were like 8-0, and then their first loss actually came in a primetime game in Denver, if I'm not mistaken. And then they wound up losing at home to Philadelphia in a year where Philadelphia just flat out underachieved under Chip Kelly. And then they wound up with the 2 seed instead of the 1 seed because of a couple weird losses, and then they wound up losing to Denver in the AFC title game. And number 1, Cam Newton, Carolina Panthers, won the MVP that season, was the very best player in the NFL that year. That was obviously the best year Cam Newton's ever had, and he really hasn't been playing at that same level since then, pretty much. Just unfortunate for him, and it's unfortunate he's out of the league right now because he's really has become an underrated quarterback, and hopefully somebody signs him, whether it's a team that needs a veteran to help them out, or a team that could eventually suffer a quarterback injury and then just signs him off the street and come in and help. So hopefully Cam Newton lands on his feet somewhere this upcoming season. And now I'm going to do my top 10 NFL games of the calendar year 2015. I have a lot of honorable mentions because there were so many good games in that calendar year playoffs and that next regular season in 2015. Honorable mentions. Giants-Cowboys week 1. Giants had the lead. Tom Coughlin with the malfunction of calling the timeout. Cowboys take advantage and come from behind and win that game. Steelers-Seahawks week 12. An unexpected shootout between two teams that were known for their defense. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks wound up prevailing. 4th place Broncos-Steelers. a fun game. Brock Osweiler was the quarterback of Denver at the time. Pittsburgh comes from behind and wins. It was a classic Roethlisberger Steelers big-time win at home against a good team type of win. Lions-Cowboys wildcard game. This was in the 2014 season, but that game was played in 2015, so that's why it's in the 2015 countdown. And Lions had the lead for a while in that game, and then Tony Romo and the Cowboys came from behind the win. Eagles-Patriots, I alluded to this game earlier, Week 13. The Eagles go into Gillette and unexpectedly win a crazy game with a couple special teams touchdowns involved. And Packers-Seahawks NFC title game. Packers dominating the whole game. Seahawks come from behind. Green Bay doesn't recover the onside kick. The rest is history. Seattle goes to their second consecutive Super Bowl. And now here's the top 10. 10th place, Cowboys-Packers. It was the divisional round game, 2014 season, but it was played in 2015. This is the game that's going to be remembered the most for the did Dez catch it game. I personally think that Dez did not catch it. Many people say to that I'm a homer because I'm a Giants fan, obviously, and no, I legitimately think that the ball hit the ground and it was what's the word that the refs like to use all the time? Inconclusive. There you go. It was inconclusive, and I thought the ball may have hit the ground at one point. And it was a game that the Cowboys probably should have won, too, because they played really well in that game. And that was a Cowboys team that nobody expected to be good. Everyone and their brother penciled them in for last place. Everyone and their brother said that Jason Garrett was a lock to get fired that year. But no, Jason Garrett wound up surviving another 5 years, in part because of that season, and obviously the season a couple years later where Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott were rookies, and they were the 1 seed that year. And then obviously the Packers go on and lose to the game I referenced, which was the missed onside kick game, or the Seattle recovers the onside kick, and we all know what happens. 9th place, Panthers-Giants, Week 15. Highly anticipated game between these two teams. Josh Norman against Odell Beckham was a huge storyline. That dominated. There was a lot of drama in that game. Panthers were blowing the Giants out. And then there was a lot of talk of, Tom Coughlin should have benched Odell for his actions. No, he didn't, because Tom Coughlin wanted to save his job. And obviously he did not save his job. I think Odell probably cost Tom Coughlin his job, if you ask me. A lot of Giants fans probably think that. And Odell, a lot of people feel that he's sort of the reason why, his emergence is the reason why they stuck with Eli Manning longer than expected. And it probably was, because the Giants probably convinced themselves that Eli Manning was still good because of Odell's presence. But that's a whole nother podcast for another day, probably with the guest, when we talk about my project that I've been working on. I'll discuss it at the end of the show. But yeah, Panthers-Giants. Giants come from behind. Odell stays in the game. Odell catches the game-tying touchdown, and then, if I'm not mistaken, the Panthers kicker at the time was Graham Gano, and then he wound up kicking the game-winning field goal as the Panthers continued their march to the top seed in the NFC. 8th place, Panthers-Seahawks. This was the coming-out party game for the Panthers. Nobody gave them a chance to win this game. Everyone's like, this is the game they're going to prove that they're a fraud, yada, yada. I will never forget this. And then Cam Newton led the Panthers to a come-from-behind win in that game, and that's what made everyone go, wow, they're actually good. They won at Seattle. Well, that Seahawks team was mediocre that year. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Cowboys went into Seattle and won. Oh, wait, no, that was the season before that the Cowboys went in there and won with Tony Romo. But yeah, the Seahawks were a mediocre team that year, and they were a wild card team that year. And then the Panthers wound up beating the Seahawks in the postseason in the 2015-16 playoffs. 7th place, Ravens-Patriots. This was the divisional round game of the 2014 playoffs. Ravens had a lead a majority of the time. Tom Brady leads the Pats to a great compromise win en route to their Super Bowl win. 6th place, Panthers-Saints, Week 13. Shootout between Drew Brees and the Saints and Cam Newton and the Panthers. Brees and the Saints have the big lead, and Newton leads the Panthers back to yet another win in that week. 5th place, Broncos-Chiefs, Week 2. This was a fun Thursday night game. This was a Thursday night opener. Peyton Manning and the Broncos, Alex Smith and the Chiefs. Chiefs led a majority of the game, and then Peyton leads the Broncos back, and then there was a fumble return for touchdown late in that game that settled it for Denver in what was, I think, one of the more impressive wins by the Peyton Manning Broncos teams over the last couple of years there when Peyton was in Denver. 4th place, Ravens-Browns, Week 12. Walk-off touchdown. The Browns were about to kick the game-winning field goal. Not so fast. Ravens run it back for the win. And everybody was just like, yep, same old Browns. It was a Monday night game. Mike Tirico on the call. Very brilliant. But yeah, I don't think the Ravens made the postseason in 2015, but that was probably the highlight of their season. Yeah, they didn't, because the postseason teams that year were Pittsburgh won that division or Cincinnati won the division that year. It wasn't Pittsburgh. Cincinnati, but then Dalton got hurt. And then Pittsburgh went in there and won the playoff game. They probably would have won whether it was Dalton or not. But I remember Cincinnati was competitive with Pittsburgh without Dalton, and then I just don't think the Ravens were in the postseason that year. But they weren't a bad team that year either. Or was that the year that they went 4-12 or 5-11? But there was a year where Flacco and the Ravens went like 5-11, 4-12, and were just a disaster. It might have been that year. I don't remember. 3rd place, Patriots-Giants, Week 10. At the time, this was the best AFC versus NFC rivalry in the league because, obviously, Eli Manning and Tom Brady in the 2 Super Bowls in 2008 and 2012. Super Bowls 42 and 46 respectively, where Eli led the Giants to those upset wins over Tom Brady and the Pats. That's why that was considered at the time the best interconference rivalry in the league. And because of Bill Belichick's past with the Giants, and he used to work with Tom Coughlin under Bill Parcells, you know the deal. Giants led the game majority throughout the time. There was a bad call in that game that benefited New England. I think the Giants had to kick a field goal instead of scoring a touchdown. And then that put the Giants up by 1 point or 2 points. And then Brady leads the Pats down the field. Landon Collins drops the game-winning, what would have been the game-sealing interception in the win for the Giants. And then Brady and the Pats take advantage of it, and Steven Gostkowski kicks the game-winning field goal as the Patriots come away with MetLife Stadium with a win, remaining undefeated. That was a great game, and a lot of people thought the Pats were going to blow out the Giants. And at the time, this was before the Giants' season sort of fell apart, and the Giants went toe-to-toe with them, and the Giants should have won that game, but no. Landon Collins drops a pick, and then Steven Gostkowski kicks the game-winning field goal from 51 yards. 2nd place, Packers-Lions, Week 13. This game will always be remembered. It was a Thursday night game. Lions had to leave the majority of the game. Then Aaron Rodgers with a famous Hail Mary to Richard Rodgers for the win. And it was probably one of the better regular season wins of the Aaron Rodgers era in Green Bay. And number 1, Seahawks, Patriots, Super Bowl 49. It was on February 1st of 2015. So this qualifies for this list. We all know what happened, obviously. Russell Wilson doesn't hand it off to Marshawn Lynch. He instead throws it. Malcolm Butler catches it in the end zone, and New England prevails, as that was Tom Brady's 4th Super Bowl, and that was the first of like that second sort of dynasty for New England with like Gronk and Edelman and that group. So there you go, my top 10 NFL games of 2015. 15. Now I want to talk about a project I've been working on during quarantine, and it's called the Madison's Bracket of Pain. It's something that my Twitter followers have been participating in. I made up a bracket, and I purposely misseeded some of these painful moments of my sports life fandom, just so there could be upsets. And I made Twitter guess which moment would be more painful, and whatever moment would advance would go on to the next round and so forth. It's similar to what Joe Beningo did on WFAN in New York with his bracket of pain. And obviously I'm a fan of the Knicks, the Rangers, the Giants, and the Yankees, all those painful moments. There's a couple random ones in there that don't involve those four teams that were painful for me as well. Like a couple Red Sox World Series were in there as well. And I had my Twitter followers vote, and my bracket versus Twitter's consensus bracket is a lot different. And I'm going to have guests on this week to compare the brackets a little bit, and one guest per region. There's 4 regions, and I'm going to have 4 guests. The 4 guests will be Derek Felix, Jeff Maglicetti, James Celestin, and somebody who I have not had on yet. His name is Julian Giulardi. He has his own podcast, which is a really, really good podcast, by the way. And I always wanted to get Julian on. He's actually good friends with James Celestin. He's really, really good at what he does. And I'm very glad that he's wanting to come on. His podcast is called G&T Sports Talk, and his co-host is Bobby Thompson. And I'm going to have on Bobby Thompson on a show later this month when I do my bracket of glory moments, which would be a lot of fun. That's something I'm still working on as well. But yeah, those 4 gentlemen I mentioned before, Derek, James, Jeff, and Julian, will each have a region that we'll analyze. And then I'm going to be by myself when I analyze the final 4 matchups and compare Twitter to my own. And then I'm obviously going to ask the guests which one did they think personally would pain me more. So it should be a lot of fun. I think I'm going to have Julian and James on Wednesday, and then Derek and Jeff later on in the week. And obviously each of those guests is going to have a quick hits segment at the end of each of their shows, so we can just talk sports for a little bit as well. Alrighty, I'll be back tomorrow recapping the latest coronavirus news. If anything comes out of this George Floyd situation that has to be addressed, I'll talk about that as well. We'll go over to the nationwide Xfinity race, KBO from tomorrow, look at the Wednesday stuff, and I'll do my 2015 top 10 MLB players and games as well. Hope you guys have a great day, everyone.